Night hangs heavy over DC. The kind of quiet that hums before chaos. Rain streaks against a traffic light as Ethan Reyes stands beside his stalled sedan. The hazard lights blinking like faint heartbeats. Two police cruisers pull up, red and blue lights slicing the mist. Officer Dalton steps out, shouting commands Ethan cannot hear, his voice lost in the fog of silence. The deaf man raises his hands, palms open, but Dalton's irritation grows. To the watching crowd, it looks like defiance. The tension crackles. Thunder murmurs above. Officer Nguyen hesitates, noticing Ethan's confusion, his eyes darting desperately between their lips. "What's your problem?" Dalton barks, laughing to the other officers. Ethan signs rapidly, pleading in a language no one there understands. In the distance, a muted rumble of an arriving storm mirrors the one about to break between misunderstanding and truth, where silence itself becomes an act of resistance. Inside the precinct, the air hums with fluorescent light and quiet mockery. Ethan sits in a plastic chair, wrists cuffed, droplets of rain pooling beneath him. Officers whisper and chuckle nearby. Dalton leans against a counter, recounting the arrest like a joke, his tone sharp, dismissive. Ethan stares at the floor, hands twitching instinctively to sign, but he stops. No one would understand. Nguyen from across the room watches in silence, guilt tightening in her chest. The soundscape falls away until all that remains is the hum of electricity and Ethan's measured breathing, the silence pressing against the laughter like a wall ready to crack. Dalton scrolls through Ethan's ID on the precinct monitor, half amused. "Computer tech for the White House?" "Sure you are," he mutters. Ethan tries to gesture, forming the sign for work, but Dalton waves him off. Nguyen leans closer, reading the digital record, and her expression shifts. "Sir, he's cleared under federal credentials," she says quietly. Dalton's smirk falters. Outside, thunder rolls again, faint but insistent. The silence feels heavier now, laced with doubt. Ethan looks up, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time as Nguyen turns toward him. The first person to actually see him. A phone rings sharply through the tension. Nguyen answers. "White House Communications Center," says the voice on the other end. "We're sending someone immediately." Dalton stiffens. Ethan tilts his head, sensing the change. For the first time, the officers exchange looks that are not of authority but uncertainty. Outside, the storm deepens. Raindrops streak the window in rhythmic lines. Ethan exhales slowly, his shoulders relaxing. His silence no longer feels powerless. It feels like control. An hour later, footsteps echo through the precinct. A tall man in a dark suit enters. Marcus Dean, the White House interpreter. His presence commands the room. "I'm here for Mr. Dick Reyes," he says, his voice even, his badge glinting. The laughter dies. Dalton's mouth opens, but Marcus raises a hand and signs fluidly, each motion precise and powerful. Ethan's face breaks into astonished relief. For the first time all night, communication flows. The silence, once oppressive, becomes sacred. Justice has arrived, not with anger, but with understanding. The air in the precinct shifts as Marcus Dean steps forward, removing his jacket with measured calm. Dalton straightens, trying to reassert command, but the balance of power has already changed. Marcus turns to Ethan, his hands moving in clear, elegant arcs, the silent rhythm of language unfolding. Ethan's eyes widen, his tense body softening with every signed word. For the first time, his story begins to emerge. The car stalled, the confusion, the fear, the mockery. Each motion Marcus translates aloud with steady authority, his voice carrying weight. "He could not hear your commands," Marcus says evenly. "He told you with his hands. You chose to laugh." Dalton shifts his stance, unable to look up. Silence fills the room again, but now it belongs to Ethan. Dalton paces, trying to mask the flicker of guilt rising beneath his practiced defiance. "We followed procedure," he mutters, but even he doesn't believe it anymore. Marcus responds coolly, signing as he speaks. "Procedure doesn't excuse cruelty." Nkawuyan steps forward, her voice low. "He was trying to communicate, sir. We just didn't listen." The words hang heavy. Ethan watches their exchange, seeing something he hadn't before. Accountability in motion. Outside, the storm begins to wane, the thunder softening into a distant hum. Marcus steps closer to the desk, placing Ethan's signed statements neatly before the officers. "The White House will be notified," he says, his tone composed but final. Nyan exhales, shoulders relaxing as she realizes the gravity of what's coming. Dalton glances at the paperwork, Ethan's federal contract, seal gleaming faintly. The room feels smaller now, the walls pressing inward. Ethan signs a final message. Marcus translates, he says, "Silence does not mean weakness." The words cut through the air like a blade of truth, and even Dalton cannot look away. The precinct chief enters, a heavy-set man with graying hair and impatience carved into his expression. "What's this about federal involvement?" he demands. Marcus meets his gaze without flinching. "Your officers mocked and detained a federal employee with a disability," he replies. The chief's face drains of color. "We'll handle it internally," he stammers. Marcus shakes his head. "No, you'll handle it publicly." The silence that follows feels like justice sharpening its edge. Ethan stands, no longer the frightened man in the rain, but the voice, through hands and interpreter, that no storm can silence. Hours later, the rain has stopped. Outside, morning light spills across the steps of the precinct as Ethan exits beside Marcus. Reporters have gathered. Word has spread. Cameras flash. Questions fly. Marcus turns to Ethan, signing slowly. "You don't have to speak. They'll hear you now." Ethan nods, raises his hands, and signs one short message for the cameras. Marcus translates, "Understanding is not a favor. It's a right." The crowd falls silent, and for a brief moment even the city seems to listen. The White House Communications Center glows with the early light of dawn as news reports flood every major network. Ethan's image, signing outside the precinct, dominates the headlines. Inside, Director Helen Ford watches from her glass-walled office, expression unreadable. Marcus stands across from her, his suit still damp from the rain, voice calm but firm. "This isn't just a misunderstanding," he says. "It's a reflection of how the unheard are treated." Ford nods slowly, the weight of politics and morality converging. "Then we make sure he's heard everywhere," she replies. In another room, Ethan waits quietly, his reflection mirrored in the polished marble, the face of a movement he never asked for but can no longer refuse. Helen enters the waiting area, her heels echoing across marble floors. Ethan stands as she approaches, unsure whether to bow or shake hands. She simply smiles and signs clumsily, "Thank you." The effort catches him off guard. It's not perfect, but it's human. Marcus watches the exchange silently, recognizing a subtle but powerful shift, empathy at the highest level. Helen sits, her tone softened. "Ethan, we'd like your help drafting national guidelines for law enforcement training." He signs slowly in return, "Not for me, for the next person like me." Marcus translates with pride. For the first time, the White House feels less like an institution and more like a heartbeat. Later that afternoon, cameras roll as the White House announces a press conference. Ethan stands at the podium beside Marcus and Helen. Rows of journalists fill the room. Marcus signs alongside Ethan, their synchronized rhythm forming a seamless dialogue between silence and sound. "This isn't about punishment," Ethan signs. "It's about understanding. The bridge between words and humanity." The statement travels across media networks within minutes, rippling through homes, precincts, and classrooms across the country. Somewhere in a small apartment, Officer Guyan watches the broadcast in quiet awe, realizing how one moment of hesitation can turn into a movement. At the precinct, Dalton sits in an internal review room, his badge on the table before him. The laughter from that rainy night echoes faintly in memory, but now it sounds hollow. Nguyen enters quietly, not in uniform this time. "They're asking for your statement," she says. He nods, eyes downcast. "He never fought back," Dalton mutters. "He just stood there." Nguyen replies softly. "That's what makes it worse. Outside, the world is changing, but in this small room, the first seeds of remorse take root." Night falls again over Washington. From his hotel balcony, Ethan watches the city shimmer. The Capitol dome, glowing like a beacon beyond the rain-cleared sky. Marcus joins him with 2 cups of tea. "You changed more than they expected," Marcus says with a grin. Ethan signs back. "I just told the truth." Down below, protesters hold signs reading, "Justice has a language." The camera lingers on Ethan's hands, resting on the railing, silent, yet powerful. The storm has passed, but its echo has reshaped the city forever. A week later, Washington buzzes with conversation. Television anchors dissect Ethan's story, activists flood social media, and police departments nationwide scramble to address their own failures. Inside the White House, Helen Ford reads a draft proposal for a new National Communication Equity Act. Marcus and Ethan stand nearby, reviewing details of accessibility standards for public service training. The energy feels different now, purposeful, unified. Yet beneath it, Ethan remains quietly haunted by that rainy night. He signs to Marcus, "They saw me as nothing." Marcus replies gently, "And now they see you as everything." The room falls silent as Helen looks up, her pen poised over the document. "Let's make it law," she says. Meanwhile, at the precinct, the internal review hearing unfolds. Dalton sits before a panel, the echo of every mocking word replaying in his head. Nguyen testifies first, her voice steady. He didn't resist. He didn't understand. The room is still. Dalton glances toward her, seeing not betrayal but courage. When it's his turn, his voice falters. "I thought he was ignoring me," he says softly. "But I ignored him first. For once, there is no defense, only regret." Outside, the press waits, hungry for judgment, but inside, the real sentence is self-awareness. Ethan returns to the neighborhood where it all began. The cracked pavement still bears faint stains from that stormy night. Children play near the corner, unaware of the history made there. A neighbor recognizes him, the woman who once stood filming with her phone. She approaches with a hesitant smile, holding her child's hand. "You gave them a reason to listen," she says softly. Ethan smiles, signs, "Thank you," and kneels to the child's level, teaching her how to sign her own name. The simplicity of the moment carries more power than any speech. A full circle between fear and belong. At a national law enforcement summit, Helen takes the stage to announce the passing of the new legislation. Behind her stand Marcus and Ethan, living proof of its necessity. Cameras flash as she declares, "From this day forward, all public service officers will be trained in inclusive communication." Applause swells across the hall. Ethan's gaze sweeps over the sea of uniforms, some clapping, some hesitant, all listening. When Marcus signs the words, "Justice through understanding," Ethan joins him. And together they bridge the gap between sound and silence once more. This time, with the nation watching. That evening, Nguyen finds Ethan outside the hall. She approaches quietly, unsure if she deserves to speak. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry," she says softly. Ethan smiles gently and signs, "You listened when it mattered." Marcus, standing nearby, translates aloud, his tone filled with warmth. Guyan exhales, the guilt finally giving way to peace. As they stand beneath the Washington dusk, three lives once divided by silence now share a quiet understanding. The city hums around them. No sirens, no shouting. Only the quiet rhythm of renewal. Morning breaks over a city transformed by conversation. News segments highlight training programs rolling out across states. Officers stand in classrooms learning basic sign language, awkward but willing. Ethan watches from a cafe window, coffee cooling beside him as he scrolls through footage on his tablet. Marcus joins him, setting down a small White House pin. "They want you to represent the new accessibility task force," he says. Ethan signs. "I'm not a politician." Marcus smiles. "You're a voice, even without sound." Outside, a street musician strums a slow tune, and for a moment, Ethan closes his eyes, feeling the vibration through the glass. A melody without words, yet full of meaning. Dalton leaves the precinct for the last time, his badge now turned in. The building looms behind him, the same doors he once entered full of certainty. In his hands, a folded piece of paper, Ethan's public statement printed from the news. He reads it again, the words, "Understanding is not a favor, it's a right." The weight of them lingers. Nguyen stands by her patrol car watching him go. Their eyes meet briefly. No hostility, just the quiet acknowledgement that change always costs something. As Dalton walks into the sunlight, his shadow stretches long behind him, blending with the city's morning traffic. One man disappearing into consequence. In a classroom at the DC Police Academy, recruits practice sign language under the guidance of instructors from the new program. Projected on the screen is a still image of Ethan from the press conference, his hands mid-motion. The instructor, Nguyen, stands before the class demonstrating the signs for stop, help, and understand. Her movements are deliberate, graceful. She pauses, looks at the cadets and says, "This isn't just language training, it's humanity training." The room falls quiet as her words sink in, the echo of change reaching its next generation. At a small community event downtown, children and families gather for Voices of Inclusion Fair. Booths display art by deaf creators, interpreters guide visitors through exhibits, and a stage features youth performances in both spoken word and sign. Ethan walks through the crowd quietly, humbled by what's grown from his pain. A young boy runs up and signs, "You're the man from TV." Ethan laughs, nods, and kneels to sign back. "Yes, but now it's your turn." The boy beams and runs back to join his friends. From a distance, Marcus watches, smiling, knowing that the movement no longer needs leaders, only listeners. That night, Ethan stands again beneath the same streetlight where it all began. The rain has returned, soft and steady, washing the city in reflection. He looks up, his face calm, his eyes bright with quiet victory. The soundless world around him feels alive now, no longer isolating, but full of meaning. Marcus joins him, umbrella in hand, and the two stand in silence, watching cars pass. A police cruiser slows nearby, the officer inside offering a respectful nod before driving on. Ethan smiles faintly. The cycle has turned. Justice wasn't delivered by punishment, but by understanding, and the echo of that truth will outlast any storm. Months pass, and Ethan's story becomes a blueprint for reform across America. Training programs rise under the banner of the Reyes Initiative. News broadcasts show officers learning to sign, schools introducing deaf awareness courses, and citizens volunteering to bridge the communication gap. In his modest office at the Department of Accessibility, Ethan signs a message for a new public video. Change begins with patience, not pride. Marcus records beside him, smiling as he translates. For too long, Ethan continues, silence was mistaken for absence, but silence is full. It only needs to be understood. The message spreads faster than they expect, reaching corners of the country where empathy once had no length. In a quiet living room in Kansas, an older police officer sits with his teenage daughter, watching Ethan's interview on television. "Why didn't we learn this before?" the girl asks. He sighs, rubbing his temples. "Because we didn't think we had to." The daughter begins mimicking Ethan's signs, slowly repeating the word respect. The officer watches her hands, realizing that justice is more than a badge. It's a gesture learned from those brave enough to teach it. The television flickers softly, the sound of rain outside matching the rhythm of silent transformation. At a national education summit, Helen Ford delivers a keynote address on the cultural power of inclusion. Her words echo through the grand hall. True leadership listens, especially when words fall silent. She gestures toward the audience, where Ethan and Marcus sit among educators, activists, and officers. Applause rises like a wave. Ethan looks around. Faces of every background united in shared understanding. He glances at Marcus, who signs, "This is what justice looks like." Ethan nods, tears glinting in his eyes, realizing that what began as humiliation has evolved into a national awakening. Back in D.C., Nguyen visits a new community outreach center, the first of its kind dedicated to police-deaf relations. She walks the halls, watching officers and interpreters train together. On one wall hangs a photo of Ethan standing outside the precinct months ago, hands mid-sign, rain cascading around him. Nguyen smiles faintly, tracing the frame's edge. A young recruit approaches her and signs, "Thank you, ma'am." Nguyen signs back, her hands steady. "No, thank him." The center hums with new voices, some silent, all equal. That evening, Ethan delivers a live broadcast from the White House garden, a symbolic close to his chapter. Marcus stands beside him, interpreting his camera's role. "Change," Ethan signs slowly, "is not a sound, it's a choice. One that begins every time we choose to listen." His hands move with grace, the air alive with emotion. As he finishes, applause echoes from behind the cameras, journalists, staff, and even Helen standing proud. Marcus places a hand on Ethan's shoulder, and together they look up at the Capitol lights shimmering in the distance, the city now silent but awake. Months later, the world has moved forward, but not forgotten. Ethan walks through a university campus where banners celebrate National Inclusion Week. Students sign greetings as he passes, their laughter bright under spring sunlight. A mural of his likeness decorates one wall. Ethan beneath rain, hands raised in mid-sign, haloed by color and hope. A student journalist approaches with a smile and asks Marcus, who now teaches part-time, "Do you think one person can really change a system?" Marcus glances at Ethan, who signs back softly, "One truth can." The student nods, understanding more in that moment than words could ever explain. Back in his apartment, Ethan sits at his desk surrounded by letters, thousands of them. Messages from families, teachers, officers, and children thank him for what his courage inspired. One small envelope catches his eye, handwritten, trembling script. He opens it. "I was the one who laughed that night. I am learning now." It's signed, Mike Dalton. Ethan's expression softens. He signs to himself, "Then we both learned." He places the letter gently in a drawer labeled, "Keep." The sound of rain begins outside again, soft and forgiving. Dalton, now working at a community center, leads a group of young cadets through a workshop on empathy in law enforcement. His voice is steady, but humble. "The first thing you listen to," he says, "isn't sound, it's presence." On a nearby table sits a framed photograph of Ethan signing at the White House. Nguyen steps into the doorway, watching silently with pride. The man who once mocked now teaches respect. Justice has found its purest form, not through punishment, but through transformation. At sunset, A national ceremony unfolds on the White House lawn to commemorate the first year of the Reyes Initiative. Helen Ford delivers a closing address. Justice, she says, isn't the absence of wrongdoing. It's the presence of understanding. The audience rises in applause as Ethan steps forward. He doesn't speak. He signs a single phrase. We finally hear each other. Marcus translates softly. For a moment, the entire crowd, hundreds of citizens, officers, and leaders, raise their hands and sign the same phrase back. Silence sweeps across the lawn, but it's the kind of silence that speaks louder than any sound. Later that night, Ethan returns once more to the quiet streets of D.C. He walks beneath the same lamppost where his journey began. The rain has stopped, but the air still carries that faint, familiar mist. He looks up at the empty sky and signs one final message to the wind. Thank you for listening. The camera pans upward, following the invisible path of his gesture into the stars. The city lights shimmer below, not as chaos but as harmony. Every flicker a heartbeat of understanding. The sound fades to silence, not empty, but full. The world finally hearing what silence always meant to say.